Hello.
Hey, it's April 1st, 2025, 7:30 PM. I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Town of Willington Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Members present, myself, Andy Marco, Doug Roberts, Becca Sinowski, Joe Hall, and Bill Bennell. All right, no applications for receipt tonight, no public hearings, brings us to new business. Item 1, PZ-25-5. Special permit renewal, 1 year for section 15, excavation, sand and gravel at 66 Naverdal Road. Owner applicant W. Williams. Okay, it's up
Hello.
there.
Yep. You there?
Hello. Yep.
Okay. Yep. So Wayne Williams here for my permit for renewal. There's really no changes. Uh, can't believe a year goes by so fast.
I answered my question. I was gonna ask if there were any changes.
Mr. Williams, has the problems with the dirt bikes changed at all?
I haven't heard any from the neighbors, so I can't honestly answer that. And I've never seen any, but I don't know.
Okay. I haven't heard anything about it either.
That's a good thing.
That is a good thing.
Yep.
How much material, if any, was taken out of here last year?
None.
Okay,
I will call the neighbor and just check on that dirt bike, but I haven't heard any problems and they usually call me and I've told them to call me if they have any problems.
Right, and I've seen him around town. He's the septic guy. I've seen him around and said I asked him, I don't know, 8 months ago, and he said, been quiet, but there is.
we haven't,
Or I saw him somewhere. And
haven't heard anything on
yeah,
that.
good.
I think they've moved to the main roads.
Yeah, probably just. Same right through my neighborhood.
Yeah, right. They just ride on the road. They're all older.
Yeah.
Can't go fast enough in a gravel pit.
Anybody have any questions?
No.
All right, well, nothing's changed really.
I'm gonna make a motion that we approve PZ -25-5 special permit renewal for 1 year for section 15. Excavation of sand and gravel at 66 Navajlo Road, owner applicant W. Williams.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, you're all set.
Thank you.
Like to thank all of you and stay safe.
All right, have a good night.
All right, thank you.
Okay, no unfinished business, which brings us to approval of minutes, March 4th, 2025. That was pretty straightforward.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of March 4th, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And one abstention, okay. Right. Staff report discussion, item 1, review of application fee.
Walter, do you have to just mention correspondence and public purpose, even though there's no public here, just so
Yeah,
we're
there's none,
correct?
and there's none.
Okay. Official.
So at the last meeting or a couple of meetings ago, we talked about sort of in line with the budget, just the application fees. We found that, not that it had anything to do with costs or, you know, there was necessarily an error, but the ordinance that was on the books for fees is a 12-section ordinance, and only 9 sections were actually in the town clerk's office. So we found the full version and provided that to general code, but in doing so and kind of looking at the fees, our existing fee ordinance is extremely complicated. It's several pages and there's all different, actually, I meant to print that for you, but I forgot. I can probably bring it up. You can take a look at it. You may likely want to see it. So in addition to the fee ordinance that we have now being complicated, it is not something that I think really has been followed for many years, because we're applying the same fees to the same permits that were in place when I started, and they don't all jive. But I also believe that we lose money on our applications. So we talked about our legal notice fees for anything. So any commission decision requires a legal notice after the decision has been made. So like, for example, this application we just did will run 1 legal notice. The notices of decision are generally 85, 100, 105. And then for anything that has a public hearing, we have to do 2 legal notices advertising the hearing prior to the meeting. So for all special permits, zone changes, text amendments, we have 2 notices up front and 1 after. And we average about $100 per legal notice. We also send $58 of every application, no matter what, to the state. So approximately $358 plus or minus is what our costs are.
So it's 58 for each application?
So in the state's brilliance, they say you are required to charge every applicant $60.
So what happens with a shed where you only pay 30?
They pay 90. We charge them 60. So these are the town fees. Because every town has to charge the same one. So what you have in front of you is just what the towns charge.
Then they get tacked on top of it with the
The
state.
60 gets added for every single land use application that's under 124 and 126, which is planning and zoning, all the ZBA stuff, all the inland wetland stuff, every land use application.
So right now to go to ZBA, it's 120 plus the state fee of 60.
Right. Right. And so the same thing under the public hearing side, we're charging them 120. And depending on what the legal notices is by column inch. So if it's a very simple application, we can describe it very succinctly, the charges might be less. Might be a little bit, we might be $85 each instead of 100. The other thing that we deal with here is that we have to run in the Hartford Current, because that's the most substantially circulated newspaper. But based on when we have to run them, you occasionally have to do a run on like whatever they have it as a Friday or Saturday, and so that's a different zone, so there's more costs associated with that, because they don't do zoned runs on those days. So it's a little bit hard to track. I originally thought, oh, we can look at what our costs are. I can go and get information from finance and we can see, okay, our expenditures are X, but different things come out of that line, and a commission initiated application for a text amendment, for example, home occupations, we still have those costs. We don't have any revenues. So it wasn't as easy for me to be able to show that.
So by your chart here, it looks like we're a little on the low side for some of the permits
Yes.
compared to the towns around us.
Right. Yep. And
Oh, they're not a shed. I think it's all over the map, but
yeah. So like for us, you'd need like a 10-acre zone change to get to like Mansfield territory, or 20 acres, sorry. So
A building permit is needed for a shed over 200 square feet,
anything, if
even,
it's,
even under 200 square.
oh, sorry, building permit is not needed if it's under 200,
Okay,
zoning permit only. Sorry.
Okay, so so for a shed, this applies if it's under 200 square feet, even though you didn't need.
When you have a zoning permit and a building permit,
Then they pay twice. So if it's
Building
any,
department.
yeah, unless it's like something very minor or a 10 by 20 or 10 by 12 shed or something.
yeah, why would you need a zoning permit for a 10 by 12 shed as long as it's not like got right on the property line? Would you just need a building permit?
They submit the zoning permits because they have to tell us where they're going. We check for wetlands. And then we say, is it gonna meet the criteria? So if you're under 200 square feet, you avoid any of the building fees.
Right.
And you pay the flat zoning. If it's over, or for pretty much everything else, you do your zoning and then you go to building. If you don't need wetlands or something else. Let me see if I can pull this up. So this is, and I think, I wanna say we might have talked about this several years ago when I kind of first started here. Because some of the fees, things were changing. And, you know, there was, I think, some apprehension to having some of these fees be increased. You know, what could be somewhat substantially. And I think. Okay. You know, we've seen, I think, a little bit of an increase in the legal notice fees overall. But one of the things that is potentially providing some flexibility. So we see substantially more administrative zoning permits than we do commission level applications, right? You see, depending on the year, it could be 10, whatever, and how many of them are initiated internally. So, you know, we have a little bit of flexibility. We have the lower cost permits, which are higher volume, and then the higher price tag permits are certainly much lower volume. So we're not necessarily trying to make money, but if we weren't sure what to do with the special permit applications, if something around the 360 range felt too high, I guess we could try to make up for it by increasing the administrative permits to try to balance out the revenues. So. So,
We zoom that in.
yeah, I will. Let me,
And the fees are in ordinance, not zoning regs, right?
the fee ordinance is the applications are established by ordinance. The way that it's written, the Board of Selectmen can approve amendments, so you would request that they make those changes. So I'm gonna skip to the P and Z stuff and not look at the subdivision stuff for now. And maybe. And I think if I had to guess, and I started just after it went live. A lot of these things are very complicated formulas to build into any permitting software. And so when we went live with OpenGov, which was, I think, 2018, because I started and it was just gone live. It may have been that they simplified some of these sort of just to make it so that the system could calculate some of that. So right or wrong. So a non-residential special permit application is 175. And again, thinking our
When
fees
was the
are,
last time they were changed?
this is saying 2009 is what this ordinance is showing. Whether there were other amendments and it just didn't follow process, I don't know.
A long time to go without making any
Yeah.
change. Yeah, I hate to raise things on people, but I think we gotta make some adjustment here.
We shouldn't be losing,
I
we shouldn't be
agree.
spending taxpayer
And we have
money
people having to
for
process
everybody.
this stuff and everything, so it's like, it costs something.
Right, and The good thing is that if the legislature ever agreed that we did not have to publish in a newspaper and publishing on our website alone was sufficient, then we could dial back some of the permit, some of the fees. It would be.
Well, the newspapers are gone a decade from now.
Exactly, and then it'll just be, if we get that phone service or whatever, there's different ways of communicating.
It's notifications from people just keeping the open current
Yeah,
in business.
yeah, right,
Haven't subscribed to a newspaper in 10 years now.
yeah, so,
Well, I mean, a lot of towns are required to publish, you know. If they make charter revisions, they have to publish the revision, so if you're amending the chart. There are some towns that could be a $10,000
yeah.
publishing fee because they're publishing the town charter.
The full page ads for a referendum are
Yeah,
$1,500, something like that, and every time we do it, it's another $1,500.
and there's 169 towns,
Is it right?
so, I mean, it can be, the newspapers have said that it, you know, this is not a primary source of revenue or whatever you wanna call it, but they advocate against online noticing. Every time it comes up.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think there's staff level reviews, which, you know, we have application per pool is $20. Then an addition or accessory building over 300 square feet is 30. Really, the purpose of application fees is to cover the costs associated with the review of the application. A pool, a shed, a deck, a house, we're reviewing the same thing. Do you have the materials? Do you have the information on your plot plan? Are you compliant? A pool, based on this, is not less of a review than a 300 square foot shed, right? It administrative zoning permit. So these fees that what we charge are all standardized now. We just charge that flat fee because sometimes people might have a shed and a deck, they might have a pool and a pool house. There's no way for us to really work that in every time.
Why wouldn't the pool been the same price as a shed?
Yeah, I have no idea. And then non-residential structure, it's based on square footage. And then we have, again, non-residential versus residential variances is a different fee. Then there's an appeal of a ZO decision they charge. Most towns don't. And then the special exceptions, which pretty much are not a thing as much anymore because the way that the legislature changed for CBA, haven't really had those, but we've got special permit for a new 2-family, which would be 100. And then if you have a regulation change, it's 75. So it's kind of all over the place, and I don't think it really reflective of the, you know, the time necessary. So I think we should. My recommendation, I guess, would be to consider setting the application fees for the commission at a point that it covers the cost, and then I think picking a flat charge for all staff level application reviews.
But I see every town here has a difference between like a shed and a house or every one of them is a difference.
Yeah,
It's
Are you in favor of any one of these towns in particular?
tolerance, and to me seems to strike a pretty good balance, like without being super high, but they're much higher than us in most things. Other than shed.
Mansfield looks straightforward, and when you get to a zone change or a variance, they're adding more money, but it takes a lot more effort to do those, so.
yeah.
I don't.
The other thing that a lot of towns do, Bolton does it, Tallinn does it. I don't know about Coventry. I know Mansfield can, and does on complicated applications, because we've done a lot of those reviews, but they have an in-house engineer, and so does Vernon. But many towns will charge the applicant the costs associated if an engineering review is done. So we get a subdivision, they'll call up their consulting engineer and say, how much is it gonna cost you to review this? Consulting engineer will say it's gonna cost me $1,800. And then they call the applicant and say, send us a check for $1,800. In my experience, what that does is just pump up the review costs. If the town sends probably that same engineer, the per plan, and says, review this, they'll bill the town a certain amount of money. But if we say, how much is it gonna cost you to review this, because we need to charge the applicant. I haven't done any scientific studies on it, but I would bet over and over again that those fees are large. I would say, I'll stop sharing this. It is, for a commercial application, it is not uncommon, and it's different vendors, but I'm in Tallinn, it's not uncommon for that application review fee to be $2,000 or $3,000. For a consulting engineer to do a site plan review of a commercial project, think of Dollar General or something. And I think that is not a direction we should go. So that's a really, really long way of saying, if we are able to make up a little bit of that, when we do have an application that I send to our engineer, he bills us very reasonably, but that comes out of the town's budget. It'll kind of make up for some of that. But I think commission level applications, yeah, a $300 application fee for a commission level application, plus the $60 state fee. And then, yeah, somewhere, I mean, we're already at 30 for the staff level review. Plus, and then if you wanted to expand the like a new house type of review, beyond 75 to something 125 or 150 or whatever.
Do the staff level reviews have to pay the state fee also?
Yeah. Everything, yeah, we. There are some towns I think get around it, and the state would probably say. We don't believe that that's legitimate, but I know that there are some towns that get around it by doing what they call a zoning review on a building permit. And so you get a document that says you have also demonstrated zoning compliance, but you're not getting a zoning permit. I don't know, because and they'll say, well, we're not issuing a separate permit, you didn't make a separate application, but the guidance that the state has issued basically says we want you to give us the $60 for each one. So we have to pay that to the state quarterly. We have to give them the application number, range, number of applications, any that we voided, and then they give us $2 for processing. So we charge 60, retain 2, and pay them 58.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
That's kind of, it is what it is. And I just wanted to get this fee here for.
We have sent plans for review for
Yeah.
most of our major applications, right? Certainly for Loves and
Yeah.
for all those, some we just routinely vote to have an engineer review them.
So what I do is as soon as the application comes in, if it's something that is proposing any type of drainage or substantial grading or anything like that, I send it to him immediately. Because if we wait, then the timeframes get tricky
Sure.
because he has to do the review. So we've sent Loves, I mean, obviously Dollar General, and we've any of the subdivision stuff. We just had a 2-lot, one go to wetlands that was a free split, so it didn't come here, sent that to him. So when those types
What were
of
those charges that come into you, not just?
super reasonable,
Okay.
under $500.
All right,
Cause he's charging us, whatever the hourly rate is.
and we don't charge that back to the customer.
Correct.
Routinely, so.
Correct.
We want enough cushion within these,
It's a separate line. It doesn't
Right,
even come out of there.
right, but
It's,
ideally,
yes, and it was combined a couple of years ago with a separate line that the selectmen had for engineering. It used to be 2 separate line items, I think each were 10,000.
okay,
Now it was combined and reduced several years ago. But when we had some other, if we have other engineering stuff come up, or when we've had like the sidewalk project, like the stuff comes out of there. I need him to do any other inspections or. Just trying to look at under the building fees, just so that I can. Or. There we go. Yeah, the new houses, but. So like, here's one from February. A building permit application for a new house. And their application fee was. The building permit application fee was just under $5,000.
for a new home.
For a new home, yeah. And our fees are fairly. I think they're very much in line probably a little bit on the low side on the building permit side, and we aren't obviously talking about changing any of that, but just to give you a sense of what they're paying.
Well, I think the $25 per acre is a little strange. I think that should be a flat rate.
I agree.
Like, so I would. And this will be recommendation to the Board of Selectmen anyway, right? Because they hold the keys to the ordinance.
Yeah, so I think what I would do is I would propose a red line of the current fee structure that would go to them. I'm assuming after you guys looked at it and blessed it, and then I would push it over to them. I'm sure they would have to consider it. Peter probably.
I mentioned in one of the, a couple months or so ago, that this was happening.
Yeah.
And it was mostly to cover costs,
Right,
and there was no disapproval, there was no pushback on that concept.
yeah,
It's not a profit scheme, it's simply a stop loss scheme.
yeah,
You'll always have someone public.
Of course,
This,
people like, some people say fees are just another form of tax, and I say no, because it's only applies to the people that are accessing that service.
yeah.
So taxes, everyone pays.
I don't think we should jack a shed up too high, because then.
No, I don't think so either.
The sheds get put in with no permit.
Well, that's right,
Just
exactly
pull that
right.
instead, but
Exactly.
but yeah, a house certainly, special permit, in line with the other towns here. Zone change, flat fee.
Yeah, I think that frankly, the statute allows for technical reviews to be charged back to the applicant. So that could be an engineer, a specialist, in theory. There are some towns that have talked, like, I guess technically, because I'm a consultant, you could try to itemize that, but I don't really think the hours and how much time it takes a person to review, or how much time a staff person chooses to dedicate to an application is really something that we can quantify. So in my mind, the costs then become if there are public hearings associated. So a text amendment, a zone change,
Yes, those are.
and special permits, all are gonna have the same costs to the town, because we have to do the same noticing for each. We don't do. We require butters notices, but we don't send them, unless there's, it's for us, but if it's the applicant, they're sending me butters notices. So that's not a cost that we have. So to me, all the commission level applications that have a public hearing, I think you should consider just keeping it consistent, because our costs are gonna be the same.
I would support that.
Kind of like Coventry, special permit, zone change and variance are all the same price. About across the board, is that what you're suggesting, like something like that?
Right. Yeah, to me, that would make sense, and then at least we know we're covering our costs. And then I guess, so the question would be, so we're currently at 30 for the smaller structures, and then 75 for new single family. Do we wanna just leave it like that? And so essentially sheds, decks, pools, additions, all that stuff is the 30?
I like 30 for that, but for the house, though, it should go up considerably.
Okay.
75 are the lowest there.
Yeah, house, it seems like a lot more staff work. I mean, even when we're looking at a small subdivision, we spend an awful lot of time looking at lot plan where a shed would say, okay. You actually do some quick measurements and then you're fine, and
Yeah.
especially if it's below 200 square feet, you don't even need a building permit.
I think for a house, 150, 200. Two.
I don't know how long it takes. How long do you think it takes to review a single family? How much time do you think?
Depends. If it's a good engineering or surveying firm that takes the time to look at our regs, and it's an approved subdivision. That doesn't have wetlands or any other issues, and there's not a lot of grading, not very long at all, but if it has.
An hour, 2 hours?
You're gonna have that in Willington?
What?
No wetlands, grading problems?
Well, I guess, yeah,
Pile.
I guess what I would say, the part, not all submissions are created equal. So I have reviewed a lot of plans, and I can look at something in very short amount of time, know if I'm comfortable that these people can be compliant with zoning regulation.
Mm-hmm.
But. You know, anything you come up with driveway issue with fire apparatus, and so now we need to amend something, it could be a grading issue. It's.
Right.
Consider this, but sheds, decks, pools, yeah, that's quick, couple
So
of minutes.
why don't we keep that constant? Why don't we do 200 for a house?
Sure.
Let's see what the selectmen say when they get it. They can lower it if they want. Yeah, if they feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Special permit, $200.
You wanna go to 200? From the 175?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or more, like the, somebody made here.
There's 3 notices for those, right? Special permit?
Right.
$85 a piece.
It could be 80, it could be 110, it depends.
Make it
Like over
300.
Yeah, I think to make the average be that we would cover our costs, I think
Right.
you'd wanna be at 300.
200 for a house, 300 for special permit. Zone change 300.
Yeah,
300 for.
And a variance 300 there. It's consistent now.
yeah,
And it's more money than we're making now. That's what they say.
and I think we probably, not that I think we'll ever get them again, but you know, we've got some other stuff in here. I don't, like, we have special permit standing gravel and based on the cubic yards. And it's a little bit unclear to me, but like more than 1,000. More than 100,000 cubic yards, the application fee is supposed to be $2,000. But
Have we ever charged that?
no, but I don't think we're gonna get any new ones, and so then, you know. What we do is we charge the renewal, because
Okay.
we're not re-reviewing the whole thing every year. But there's also, there's very clear law in Connecticut which talks about impact fees. Which are that you can't assign a fee schedule in a way that it escalates so that. You're somehow charging them for some identified impact, whether that be impervious surface, number of parking spaces, number of units. So some of these have hints of that. I don't know that they go so far as to be that, but. Well, your property is 100,000 square feet, so we're gonna charge you $5,000 and your neighbor, right? We are not supposed to do that. They're not legal in Connecticut. So I think standardizing this. Makes it a little bit simpler. So for me, what I can do is take this and I can just do a red line. And then.
Maybe we take one more look at it.
Yeah, I'll send it to you guys. Yeah, we'll talk about it.
That way, you know, we showed some pretty good movement here in terms of doing something about it, but see what they think when they get it. Well, you one of them, so.
Yeah, well, right. I think also the more color commentary you can add as to why and how it relates to the costs.
Yeah.
The actual cost, and it's not just we wanna make more money for the
Exactly.
zoning department, no, these are actually covering.
Yeah.
Costs to the town and for only people that use that service, so it makes sense.
Yeah, the fees are on the revenues are made on the building permit side.
Right.
Not really for us. We generate a tiny bit, but, no, I mean. I was just looking at the commercial side and the only one that came to mind was Love's. I mean, their building permit fee was over $200,000. That's what they paid to the town, just to be able to build it.
A lot of money.
So we make the money on the revenues on the building side. We don't do anything substantial for.
But a lot of staff work went into that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's what's funny is that how many hours would this commission have dedicated to Love's?
Right,
We did spend a lot of.
That's my
time.
point. You dedicate dozens and dozens and dozens of hours.
we were all getting
we don't get
$50 an hour.
You don't get paid, right? But even still, you know, all the applications, whatever, and we
Right.
get $300 now. And then building does a plan review of the plan that you've spent the last year looking at, and they say that'll be $200,000. But, yeah. At least it will cover our costs and, I don't think it's unreasonable. There are certainly places that are way higher. I
And
know,
now we're more in line with the
Yeah.
other towns too, so.
I know the zone change application fee in Hartford, we charge 2,500. Commercial site plan review is like $1,000. And that brings in a substantial amount of revenue, which obviously the city needs, but different situation here. We're nowhere near that. So I'll put a red line together.
All right, item number 2 under staff report discussion, tax stabilization ordinance update.
So we had talked about this previously, and I just wanted to give a quick mention of it. I think Matt had submitted sort of a formal document and request to the Board of Selectmen for them to consider a tax stabilization ordinance, which would, if adopted by town meeting, simply allow the Board of Selectmen to enter into stabilization agreements with people as defined or entities as defined in the ordinance. So it wouldn't be for residential houses or anything like that, but
Is this a business that we want to do the town perhaps? And
it was requested by the battery energy storage developers. They wanted a stabilization agreement for the duration of their agreement with Eversource. And the rationale for them behind it was technology is, it's like buying a really big laptop. It's really expensive upfront. There's a lot of cash outlay as the technology is really expensive and then it depreciates steeply, like a car or like I said, a computer. So they would determine what's the value now, what will be the value over the duration of the agreement. Let's say it's 10 years. And based upon an assumed and identified, right? So if they're gonna pay, 10,000 this year, 5,000, 2,000, what would they take, whatever that is, and they just split it up over equal payments across the term of the agreement. They actually don't get any abatement. They just set it up so that they pay less in the first few years and then more in the last few years. And so the benefit, there are several benefits, and a lot of people are not in favor of this. People have said they don't like it, and I don't follow it because, number one, there are plenty of businesses that don't even go to a town if they won't play ball with regard to taxes, period. If you don't offer something with tax, they're not coming. Two, many towns that have larger commercial brand lists spend a substantial amount of time with their assessor in court because commercial property owners appeal their assessments. If you have one large building, we had one large scale, even, well, no, that's not a good example, we've got two, but if we didn't have two, right, if Love's comes in and they say, well, we think your building and your property is worth $18 million. And they say, well, we think it's worth 10. There's a substantial difference there in the delta. They're gonna pay on $8 million less. So it's there's a strong incentive in some cases for them to appeal the assessment. Because even a delta of a couple of $1 million or several $100,000 year after year after year after year, for them to send an attorney to court. So a lot of towns spend a lot of time doing that. So when you have a tax stabilization agreement, in addition to knowing you're gonna get exactly the same amount of revenue over the duration, you have an identified depreciation and an identified value.
It was agreed to by both parties.
Correct. And so you are in a position where, particularly for something where there may not be comps, like a battery project, you all agree on what the value is. So you don't worry that upon reval, the assessor assigns a value and they say, well, this is gonna change our tax bill by $15,000 per year. Let's throw an attorney at it and let's go to court and see if the town folds and says, okay, fine, we'll agree to take it your way. And then they save over the duration, $150,000. So there's a strong benefit to that. And then as the town plans, again, with the last round of revals, I don't know exactly what Willington saw, but a lot of towns saw the complete upending of the way that property values kind of went through certain things coming up, commercial going down, et cetera. So this again stabilizes that. You don't worry that you're gonna have something get completely thrown out of whack. So there are a lot of strong benefits to it, and the Board of Selectmen will have to identify if it has merit, and then they'll have to send that ordinance to town meeting, which would then give the Board of Selectmen to enter into a negotiation with anybody that is deemed appropriate to actually write those agreements.
you wouldn't do it on existing things, would you?
No,
It's for anything new.
Right.
Okay.
right. I mean, I guess people come in to towns all the time and ask. I was just sitting in town and someone walked in and they have an existing abatement and they basically said, we want you to continue our tax abatement or we're gonna basically close up shop. So anybody can ask, but this would just be for stabilization, not abatement. So just putting that on your radar. It doesn't have really anything to do with us in the sense that we don't look at the value of projects when it comes before you, but it does have a strong correlation to potentially, future developments and investment and all those things.
Well, thinking about that, the one that's going up by the TA, is that you've got solar panels and charging stations, which have probably a value right now, 5 years from now,
Right,
those could be
right.
a tenth of the cost, so they're gonna say, well, you've gotta change it doesn't have that value anymore, I can rebuild it for half of what I did it, so.
And they will
And
expect.
they will apply for that, and then we'll have to, unless we have evidence to the contrary, they will probably go their way.
Well, technology's changing too.
Exactly, technology's
Yeah.
changing a lot, so.
They will, yeah, those solar panels, they will expect and get, because now they're, a very strong depreciation.
Strong degree.
Because, yeah, there's a lot of, it's expensive, and then they depreciate, and yeah, every bit of new technology makes them worth less, and
And the more that go up, they just cost less because manufacturing cheaper.
right,
So I think it would be hard pressed for a local assessor to. It would be difficult for them to challenge the experts in that field. To say, no, you're wrong about cost of solar panels. That would be tough to do.
Yeah.
Or any of that high tech stuff, I think would be very difficult to challenge. Somebody wants to challenge.
Typically, when assessors are challenged in court, though, it typically doesn't go against what the assessor says, right?
I don't know, I think what oftentimes happens is the assessor says, we think it's worth X, the property owner says, I think it's worth Y. And this would be for commercial stuff, residential,
Residential.
Goes to the Board of Assessment.
Assessment.
Exactly.
Right.
But for a commercial property owner, like the TA Plaza or FedEx, that ultimately goes to court. I think what the hope is that the town says, listen, we don't want to litigate this, let's come up with a number that we agree to, but it doesn't always happen. When I worked in Newington, our assessor was constantly in court, having to defend and find comps and show why this was, the value, et cetera. But again, when you're talking about a reval that happens every 10 years, just a little bit of fluctuation in those numbers is a big shift in the tax bill and ultimately the revenue. And so, people, if they think that it's too high.
So even if you have a tax stabilization, does that mean a company couldn't litigate it?
I don't know how I'm not saying they can't, because people can sue over crazy things, as we know here, but I don't know how they could appeal an assessment when there's an identified value and an identified depreciation. So if there's an assumption that, the project will be devalued over 10 years by X% per year, I think Matt has also talked about building in some
Cost of living stuff. or
inflation
whatever you
and
wanna
just,
call it.
obviously the cost of things over time. So if you identify what all that is, and it's an agreement, I don't know how. I don't know how they could litigate it, which leads me to the last thing, which I forgot, which is there's been a strong push, and what will happen with it, I don't know, but especially with solar, to try and get solar investments and all things similar, green, blah, 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 to be non-taxable. So, a large scale solar array would pay several $100,000 in taxes, and they're really expensive. They generate a lot of tax revenue to the towns that have them. If the state says, well, these are now no longer taxable, like they do with certain manufacturing equipment and other things, then boom, that revenue goes away. If you have a tax agreement in place, the tax agreement would supersede anything happening at the legislature, from what I've been told by attorneys in towns that have done it. And the rationale is that the state does not have the authority to interfere with essentially contract law. And when you have a contract for this, I think that's kind of where, that's how it was explained to me from towns that have gone into it, and why there was a push. Because I'm in East Windsor, and they have the biggest solar farm on the East Coast, right? It's 800 acres, 126 megawatts or something. But he was explaining, on top of all the other rationale that we've talked about, from their perspective, if the state did get cute and say, oh, by the way, this is no longer taxable, they would have an agreement in place. that allowed them to continue to collect for the duration of that initial. So there was some value there.
I deal with the taxes all the time. Production equipment is not taxable.
Yeah,
Really?
Yeah, you don't pay taxes on production equipment,
Interesting.
even though.
Yeah.
But the, anything that's like a building system that's not production, yes, you pay the sales tax.
it's, yeah, taxed at the same rate as, whatever's in the middle. Personal property,
Yes.
Hairdresser.
Started to manufacture, so that's good.
all that business stuff is taxed, but yeah, you could have a business making elite aerospace products with high tech machinery. And, the machinery could be worth 10 times what the building is worth.
Sure.
Yeah, in Connecticut, they're not taxed.
Yeah,
That's
big fat zero.
an incentive to stay here.
It's so high priced to do anything in Connecticut,
Yeah.
you gotta have something.
You gotta have something.
Nobody would make anything here.
Right.
That's why a lot of towns have pushed to try to get medical facilities, because medical buildings are expensive to build. A lot of equipment, all kinds of stuff in there. But I'll keep you posted on how things go. I mean, ultimately, it's gonna come to a town meeting, and like I said, when this was first discussed at. I forget what meeting I was at. It must have been a Board of Selectmen meeting, and there were several people in the audience. It was a very, very poor
Yeah,
reception.
I think I first heard about it here with the battery farm first. That's
Yeah.
where it first came up.
Yeah, because they had asked the
Bounced
town.
around and,
So was it the public that gave it a poor reception?
At the time, I think, yes, there were members of the public were very much opposed to the idea. And I don't know who said what specifically, but, one of the comments was that given the town's financial situation, we shouldn't be doing anything to push off when we would collect funds. So if you're gonna get $60,000 in the first year and 50 and then 40 and then 30, why would we say,
Or better yet, they don't come here at all and you get nothing. So.
Yeah. Well, I think
that's part of the problem.
and I think the counter argument was that if the town is trying to budget, knowing how much money you're gonna get every single year would make things a little bit easier than trying to figure out what the depreciation might be based upon the
It
read.
also is an incentive to attract anybody here.
Right.
That's.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think we all know that big operations, everything, they do get tax breaks out of the places they locate,
Oh, yeah.
sometimes for a number of years.
Um,
I'm sorry.
yeah, no, I mean, Tallinn has tax stuff. I think Vernon does. And a lot of the bigger town, I mean, Manchester, obviously, Windsor, you've seen all the development around there. A lot of the bigger towns, this is part of what they offer, and it's to make their community more attractive. Because once the building is there, that's the investment, right? So you just gotta get it in the boat, and then over time, it tends to pay for itself. And I think looking at when you get those agreements out, they don't just hand them out willy-nilly, but. I know when first town I worked for, they would look at how big is the building, how many jobs might you create, what is your investment into the community in both hard costs, soft costs, tangible, not tangible, what are you gonna do, right? Love's, they have 60 or 80 employees. And so they would look at something like that. How many jobs are you gonna create? What would the cost be, right? Not having school-aged children, which tend to have a net cost to the town. So there's a lot of reasons why, if the development aligns with what the zoning regs allow, you wanna get them in the boat, and more places are just not interested if the town is not willing to do something. So, to your point, we wanna continue to play ball. I'll keep you posted on how that goes and where things stand with that, and obviously, and too.
Anything else?
I don't think so, no. You have anything?
Okay, it's 8:19 PM, meeting adjourned.